Cool. So we wanted to do some pair programming, both because it's fun and it's good to demo, and because since we only have 2 hours, I could use a little help to make sure we cover everything. Though I think, especially since we're not going to focus on React, the flow is actually going to be pretty nice. And we're going to build our to-do app with authentication. I'm gonna do the navigating, and Francisco's gonna drive, but it's, as you're gonna see, pretty collaborative. In Francisco, we kind of talked it through a little bit yesterday, but like, what's the order that you like to implement stuff in for building something like this?
Yeah, typically anything that has user authentication, I always like to tackle the user first, just to make sure I don't get any unexpected behavior from the database or from data handling. So I tackle the user, and then afterwards I start tackling all of the other apps. Plus, usually the user is the most complicated portion of any app when it comes to building apps with authentication capabilities.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to build the skeleton first. So let's do it. We'll build out the user, and then we'll maybe make lists and tasks, and then get the subtasks.
All right.
Yeah, are we starting from a fresh project, or do we have some scaffolding?
No, this is completely from scratch.
Okay, all right, let's do it. Let's make a new Django project then. That's probably the good starting point, and then make a virtual environment. And then install all the things.
Right. Source, env. All right, virtual environment.
And we can definitely install them piece by piece, or if you want to like copy over requirements.txt.
I'm just gonna do piece by piece. So that's
Sounds good.
Django, and then we need REST framework, right?
Yep. In fact, I'm gonna pull up I think some code from the lesson so I can give you a list of requirements.
Hit install psychopg binary. So that should be psychopg3. All right. So that's psychopg3, REST framework, and then pip install. Oh, I guess we don't need course headers for now since we're just doing the backend.
Yeah, we probably don't need them now. But yeah,
that should be
REST framework.
Okay, so here we go. So we have Django REST framework, psychopg binary. Okay, all of that's done.
And let's get there's the auth specific stuff.
The what?
The stuff specific. I think there's like 1 or 2 more things for authentication that we have to install.
It should all come from REST framework.
Oh, my apologies.
Okay, so now Django admin start project. So there it is, to do project. And then it seems like we need a user app.
Yep. And we need a database.
List app. Task. And subtask. Okay, and then a database. So create DB, to do DB. Okay, awesome. So I can see we have these 4 models. If I open up my project, I have an app for each individual model. So I have the list app, I have the subtask app, the task app. Here's my project itself, which is the to-do project, and then I have an app for the user. As far as the database goes, I went and created this database, which is to-do DB, and I can go ahead and enter to-do DB in PSQL and see that it has no dependencies. All right. What's the next?
I would vote for, let's go to settings.py and add our apps and add our database, and add the other stuff we need for Django REST framework. So let's add the yeah, let's add the REST framework. And the stuff we need, which is I think REST framework auth token, and I'm gonna double check that right now. It's REST framework, yeah, auth token.
Yeah. List app, task app. Oh, hello, the subtask app. And then any pros/cons for making just a list app and a user app. It's just going to be a lot to have in one file. If you could manage it that way, you could definitely go ahead and manage it that way. I'd rather have everything in their separate applications so that I can move information around. Does that answer your question, Cody?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I vote the same. I think users is a good one too, because it's a pretty separate world in a lot of ways. Will, question about .env, we're not using the noun project. We definitely can add .env. It's a good practice for the Django secret key. I feel like we can come back to that later, Francisco, unless you feel like it's worth like installing .env and using it to get the Django secret key now.
We could definitely do it. Yeah, I think it's pip install .env. No, it's python -.env.
Yeah, I think that's
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Okay, and then
and we're gonna want to import it at the top of settings.py. And give me a second, I'll kind of pull up the guide code here for that. We just can do like from .env, all one word, import .env underscore values. Yeah, nice.
is that the right way of using that?
That is, yeah, you got it. It's just we call the function and we pass in .env as a string. And if you wanted to put the .env file somewhere else, you could probably put a path to it there. I'm not certain, but you pretty much always want to put it in the Django project root. Or if you have a preference, Francisco, actually, I don't have super strong feelings on that for where you want the .env file.
I just don't remember off the top of my head what .env takes in as an argument, or is it just a function that we're supposed to call?
Oh, we pass in the name of we pass in as a string .env, literally like the string value of the file name. Yeah, exactly. And that does assume that it's in the Django project root, right where manage py is.
And then afterwards, we just use the get function.
Correct. And then we can just pass in the name of the environment variable. Exactly.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so that should take care of that. Back to where we were, which would be authentication. Now
So,
we need to add the REST framework information, right?
yes, thank you. That we do. So that's going to be a const variable. I'm looking at some guide code here, all uppercase REST framework, and it's a dictionary. Oh, yep, and we can totally do that too.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so that's just mapping out the user model. And
Yeah,
then
go for it.
for the REST framework was, what was it again? Is it just
Yeah, just REST underscore framework, and then it's a dictionary. And then inside that, as a string, all caps default authentication classes. And that's going to be a list. And thank you again, whoever pointed out that error I made the other day when I made that a dictionary instead of a list. So default authentication classes is then going to be like a list, and inside of that, we're going to put another string. And this one is all lowercase, well, lowercase REST framework dot authentication dot, and then token authentication is camel case. Yeah, that looks good. That looks good.
Okay, fantastic. So that should set up all of our settings right there.
Yeah, and we're just making we're gonna make a model in the app user app, or in the user app,
Yeah.
name user.
Grid.
Yeah, this is the giant list of imports.
Abstract user, there it is. That should be it, right? So now it should be class user, and then that's abstract user. And then we have an email, which should be a models.email field. That should have a unique constraint, right? Because it's gonna be our username. Username field, that should be equal to the email. And then we have our required fields, which should be an empty. But then this one also has age.
And I'll just double check the assignment itself to see if there's anything user related that we're missing, but I think we're let's see, updates user age. Looks like there might be display name and address on the user, but we could, oh, you got them, nice.
Yeah, but it seems like display name is not a requirement because it has a question mark. So I guess that would be a null equals true and blank.
Yeah, and we probably should make that unique. It'd be weird to have two users with the same display name, but I don't like have strong feelings about that either way.
Okay. I think I'm gonna keep my life simple and leave it and leave it open so that we don't have errors. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. That was awesome. We got a user model built. We've set up the settings.py for most of the authentication stuff. What do you think about, what do you want to do next? My first thought is maybe we make like a route to do something with the user, because then we can write a view and start adding in authentication stuff in the view. Or what are your thoughts?
I kind of want to run my server to see if it worked.
That's a good idea. Let's do it. Yeah, good call.
Let me make migrations real quick.
Oh yeah, yes, we gotta do that.
The field email clashes with the field email from model user app dot user. Oh,
Nice. Yeah, and actually, this is another great reason to do authentication first, to avoid that issue of the migrations where it kind of wants this user model with authentication to be one of the first migrations that gets run.
okay, awesome. So it seems like it all worked. Let me do if you don't mind, Adam, I would like to do like a quick rundown of what we did so far, and then afterwards see if people have any questions.
Sounds good.
Awesome. So we went ahead and created this project, which is the to-do project. I put it inside of a nested directory just because I have too much noise going on out here, and I didn't want it out here and having to mess with all those files. So I put it inside of a nested directory. And then afterwards, we went ahead and created all of our individual apps. So we have our list app, subtask, task, and user app that were created. Now, just because I created these apps doesn't mean that they were linked to my Django project, right? The apps are created, but my Django project itself has no idea that these apps exist unless I tell it that these apps exist. So I have to go inside of my settings, and inside of settings, I can see that under installed apps, one, I have REST framework, which is something that I installed in my virtual environment. Then I have the auth token because I know I'm going to utilize token authentication here shortly. But then I tell my project, hey, these apps exist inside of our root directory. So know that if I reference any of these, and you need to keep track of them whenever this API or this original project is being pinged. So now it knows that all these apps actually exist and it's tracking all of them. Next, I wanted to make sure that it was connected to a database. So we went down to databases, changed backends to PostgreSQL to ensure that it's actually connecting to my Postgres on my local machine. And then I gave it the same name of the database that I created through my terminal. So now if I take a look at my SQL database, when I ran /d for relationships the first time, there weren't any. And after I made migrations, I can see that all of the relationships that I have now created, including the token authentication relationships, are now in here. What is next? Oh, finally, to finish token authentication, I went into REST framework. I gave it the authentication classes to know that it's coming from REST framework. And then I mapped my user app as my project's user model. So now my project won't actually utilize the default user. Instead, it's going to utilize this user from the user app. So now if I take a look at the user app in the model section, we can see that I brought in an abstract user, which an abstract user actually comes in with a bunch of default fields. We can see here that it has a username validator, it has username, first name, it has all of these things already provided for us that we can create. Now, any field that we don't specify, it's still being created, right? So if I go into SQL and I say select all from user, we can see that all of these fields still exist. I still have ID, password, last login. I never made that, but that's part of what comes in Django. It's somewhere in here. It's one of these fields in here that's called last login that I cannot find, and that's probably because it's inheriting it from abstract base user. Yep.
That would make sense.
There.
That's the one that has just username and password.
Right. So there's my last user. So we can see that all of these fields are being created. I may not have specified them, but it's utilizing inheritance to create all of those fields within that user. So I finally went to specify the age, display name, and address, created my actual user. And now I'm able to actually run my project. And it's able to run effectively without any warnings or errors. Does anyone have any questions over anything that we did so far to set up the user authentication? Well, it's not completely set up, but at least map it out through our settings.py.
Yes. Can I see your .env file real quick?
Of course.
Okay, and that's just that's the only thing in there, the Django key.
Correct.
And how do you generate that key again?
This key already comes with your Django project when you go ahead and create it. There's a specific Python command that you can utilize, or you're referencing as in, how do I get it into my settings.py?
How do you get in your settings.py?
Yeah, so in my settings.py, at the very top, I have to call .env values. Then after that, I set that function. So .env values is a function that's going to essentially create a dictionary for all of the values within my .env, right? So I call this function and I give it the name of the environmental file that I wanted to load. So I give it .env. So it knows that it's supposed to look into my project and grab this file .env, and then it creates a dictionary where Django key would be a key and the key would actually be a value. So then once I scroll down here, so we see that I set that return of a dictionary to the value of env, and then it just works like a regular dictionary, right? I call env.get and I pass it the key that I wanted to look for so that I can get that value returned into the secret key variable. Does that answer your question, Andrew?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Of course. Anthony?
Hey, just super quick. How did you get under the hood of abstract users? What did you click?
Oh, for abstract users, I just hold, well, I'm on a Mac. I think for Windows it's Control, or yeah, I think for Windows it's Control, but for me, I just hold down Command and then it will highlight it with this blue thing, but with like a blue underline. And then when I click on it, it takes me straight into Abstract User so that I can
That's
see everything that's going on.
I think
Cool.
if you right click and do go to definition, does it do the same thing?
Oh, I wonder. It does do the same thing.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so that's another way to do it. I didn't know about that keyboard shortcut, which is awesome.
Any other questions?
Can you explain the required fields on line 13? Like I see it's not being used, but what typically would you use that for?
Yes, so for required fields, by not passing in anything, I'm saying that everything is a required field, right? So I'm saying that it's going to utilize everything that comes in inherited from abstract user and everything I specify in here. But essentially required fields would be a way to get rid of anything that's inherited. So if I could put here in required fields that I only want email, age, display, that I only want these things, right? And that I don't want it to grab anything from abstract user. Well, if I put that in required fields, only these field names, everything else that's coming in from abstract user would be excluded when I create my model. Does that answer your question, Matt? Of
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
course.
Does that include the password too, or do you have to specify that in the required fields if you want to exclude things?
You would have to specify the password. If you're actually utilizing the required fields, you have to specify the password. Other ones will try to exclude it. Does that answer your question, Megan?
Yes, thank you.
Of course. And then abstract user don't have a definition in my code, but I'll just, okay. Yeah, we'll have to take a look at that here shortly.
Oh, yeah, I wonder if that's a Python path thing.
All right. Okay.
Oh, did we make a gitignore for the .env file?
We have not. I can definitely do that though.
For some reason, I always really enjoy making .gitignore files.
All right. Okay, so there's our .gitignore. It's not ignoring the env and any pi cache within the project. Awesome. Okay. That's it. What's next, Adam?
Let's see, we've got a user. We've set up the auth skeleton. Eventually, we're gonna want to get to lists and tasks and subtasks, but what do you think about maybe like being able to create a user and log in and log out? What are your thoughts?
I'm all about it. Okay, so let's see.
Yeah, let's take some user views. And we're gonna want to end up where we're ending up here is we're gonna have a route for sign up, log in, log out. And if we want to make the info route info, we can as like a helper to get data. And yeah, we're gonna make an API view class named sign up or whatever we want to call it. I think you're pretty much already importing almost all the things. Yeah, we're gonna want a 201 created, and probably a 404 not found for errors. And that's probably, we can probably get away with, or yeah, bad request. We can probably get away with those for now. Actually, I should check the assignment. I apologize. You already got there. Then the assignment actually, yeah, the assignment tells us we want a 201 created when we create a user, and we want a 400 bad request when we're unable to create a user with our sign up route.
All right. Okay, so that should do the trick then, right? Is there anything that we have to, where does token authentication and is authenticated get imported from?
Yeah, those come from REST framework, REST underscore framework, dot auth token dot models. We import the token model.
Yeah,
So dot auth token,
I
and
have
then, oh, you've got that. I'm so sorry. Authentication, REST framework dot authentication, import token authentication. And then REST framework dot permissions, import is authenticated.
all right. Okay,
Right.
that's a lot of imports, but we're good to go now.
Yeah, now we're cooking. And that token model, folks, we saw there's an actual table created in the database for the token, and that's the model, the Django model that we use to interact with it. Yeah, so we need a sign up. It's going to be a post request, and we need to use the request object to get data. So we're going to want request.data and then probably bracket notation or your flavor is desired. Yeah, I like that. So the one thing I think we have to do, and actually you might know a bit better than I with Django. I know in class yesterday we created a request.data username key on the request and gave it the value of the email address passed in by the user. And I'm assuming that's because Django REST framework and Django is looking for that username because that's sort of how Django thinks about authentication. Is
Right.
that what's going on there?
Yeah, it does require the username field to exist in there.
Got it. Awesome. Then the next step is we're going to want to create our user. So we're going to want to do like new user or whatever we want to call it, and then the user model. So user.objects.create user with an underscore. So we're going to be using a method and passing in passing in data. Exactly. Nice. And then we need to create the token. So let's make a variable named token, and we'll use the token model, and we can just do token.objects.create and pass in as a named argument user equals user or new user, excuse me. And that gets us pretty far. And at this point, we can just create and return an HTTP response. And we probably want the 201 success code. And let's see what the assignment says about what needs to be in the body. Receive all arguments. I think there's nothing specific about what needs to be in the body of this response.
Okay, well, we probably want the username and the
email.
token, right?
Yeah, well, you're right. We definitely need the token. I would vote for sending back the email as well, since that's what the client doesn't make a big difference either way. But the token is, yeah, the most important piece. Thank you. Yeah, I'll often just return like all the user info in a response like this, but it's really more of just a design choice. And I think that kind of does it. And now we can hook this up with a route.
Great, awesome. I'm just doing some error handling real quick.
Nice.
Right. And then we need a new file.
And actually, I should have asked, do you want to go to routing or do you want to like build out the rest of the view logic first?
Oh no, this is fine. From Django.urls info path, I think. There you go.
You got it. And then from our view file, just import the API view. Yep. And then we're just going to use our API view and call the as view method on it. And we can give a name to our path with whatever name we want to give it for easy reference. And then we should be we should be cooking, and I think we should actually be able to test this if you want with Thunder Client.
We need to tie it in with our project.
Oh yeah, that would help, wouldn't it? Thank you. Good call.
I totally wasn't practicing last night.
Oh good. We're getting in the zone.
Let's see. Users. What do I need to create a user again? I need a
I want to say we're gonna need an email and probably a password.
where's my model? There it is. Okay, so I need email.
Yeah, we can get away with email and password. Nice.
Is that it? Oh no, I need H.
Yep. And we don't want a trailing comma. That's always a gotcha for me with JSON.
All right, easy day. So users, and then this should go to sign up. I get a 401 unauthorized, and that's probably because I was practicing. There you go.
Oh yeah, that'll do it. Awesome. I see that 201 there. Nice. Nice.
I'm gonna go ahead and add this token real quick, and then I'm gonna do a quick overview of everything we just did real quick, and then answer any questions anyone may have. All right. Okay, so what just happened? What did we just do? Essentially what we just did was we finished creating this user app. We went into our views and we wanted to create a way to sign up for the user. So we created this class called signup, which takes an API view from inheritance. It gives this function a little bit of extra, it gives it the ability to handle any type of request. And after that, it's just OOP, right? So it's handling a post method. That post method is going to reference to itself, which is the class, and then handle a request. Now I put everything inside of a try and accept block just because I like to be able to see my errors. You definitely don't need to have exception handling, but I strongly recommend that you do. Otherwise, it's going to return 500 server errors. Remember, 500 errors mean it's your fault as a programmer, whereas 400 errors mean it's their fault as the people making the request, right? So you got to make sure that you shift the blame to them. Other than that, I went ahead and created a copy of the data within request.data. I added a username field to that dictionary where I added the email or the value of email to that username field. So now I have both the email and username key with the same value. And that's okay, because if we look at my models, that's what I told it to do, right? My username field will reference an email, and my email is still just an email. All right. Afterwards, I created a new user utilizing create user. The reason why I utilize create user instead of create is because create user will hash my password for me. Whereas if I utilize create, it will not hash the password. It will still create an instance, but it won't hash the password when it goes into the database. So you want to make sure that you utilize create user. Then I went ahead and created a new token where the user that it's taken in for its one-to-one relationship. We could take a look at the token model. We can see that it has a key property that gets automatically generated through one of its meta functions, which I'm not really going to go into just yet. But we can see that the user is the one thing that I have to provide to it, because it creates a one-to-one relationship to a user. So I pass in that new user that we created, and afterwards I return a response with the email of said user and the key of the token attached to that user with a status of 201 created. Because if we look at our HTTP responses, 201 is what should be responded whenever we make a post request or something gets created within the database. And then my exception handling, I'm just telling them something went wrong. I'm printing out the errors for myself so I can see it in my terminal, and then I'm returning a 400 bad request. So after that, I was able to send a request through Thunder Client where I pass in all the required fields that I have inside of my model. We can take a look at the model. We see those fields. Those are the same ones that I have within my request. And when I sent that post request, it was able to return to me the email and the newly token that I needed. Now with this token, I went into headers. We added this authorization header. I prefaced the token with the word token, added a space, and then put in the token that I needed for it to be saved. Does anyone have any questions about that process?
Yeah, where are you actually saving that token?
Where is this token being saved?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. So with my view, when I go ahead and create this token, it's actually automatically saving the set token into my database. So if I go here into my database, I can do, I think it's select all from token.
Token underscore token, I think. Auth something.
No,
If you tab it out, it might.
from auth token. There it is. There you go. And now we can see that the token's actually being created to my database, right? So here's the key field that was created. It tells me the date in which it was created, which was a moment ago. And then it gives me the user that it's attached to. So it's attached to the user ID of 1. It creates that one-to-one relationship. And if I run select all from users, we can see that the ID to this user is 1. And that's where that one-to-one relationship is coming from. Does that answer your question, Sean?
Yep. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, great question. What other questions you folks have about sort of this implementation of our sign up endpoint?
Could you just walk through what you did in Thundercloud again real quick?
Of course. Yeah, so in Thunder Client, I put in the endpoint that I was trying to ping, which was API users. After I placed in the endpoint, I went to my body, and inside of my body, I passed in the email, pretty much all the fields that are here. All right, so if I take a look here. So here's my model. I know that it's going to need an email, so I pass in an email. I know it's going to need a password, even though it's not showing up here. I know that the password is assumed, so I need to pass in a password. For display name, I went ahead and provided a display name. Address is a text field, so I was able to provide an address. It doesn't necessarily have to be all correct because it's just a text field, and we don't have a validator to make sure that that's actually providing an address, but this is okay for now. And then age, which is a positive integer field, and I passed in the age of 25. Once I sent that post request, I went over to my view. My view was able to create a user and a token and return to me the email of said user along with their token. Does that answer your question, Robert?
Yeah, appreciate it.
Of course.
Cool. Should we build the login endpoint?
Sure. Yeah. Let's move on.
All right. So we're going to want to make another API view class and call it login. It's also going to do a post request. And then the first thing we're going to want to do in our post request, in our post method is get the email and password from request.data, which is the body of the HTTP request. And it's a great call to put it in a try block. And once we have email and password, we're going to use Django's authenticate function, which I think we imported, but I'm not actually 100%. Nice. I think it's Django contrib auth. I'm looking now. Yes, it is contrib auth and it just import authenticate. Nice. Oh, good call. Those might help as well. Though I actually don't know if we end up needing to use those with Django REST framework. You may actually be better than I do there.
Okay, so now we have the email and password, and then I'm assuming the user will be authenticate.
Exactly. And yeah, the only wrinkle there is because Django thinks in terms of usernames, the named argument is username equals email. And folks, remember, that's what we did when we created that user model, is we told it, hey, your email field, that's the username. And now what we can do is we're gonna do an if. Yeah, exactly. If we get the user, then we're gonna want to get the token, and we use the token model. And we do token objects, and we can use get or create, since a token may already exist for this user, and we can just pass in as a named argument the whole user instance, like user equals user. Yeah, exactly. And now we can return an HTTP response with the token, and we should probably just have it look exactly the same as the one we returned for sign-in. So maybe just like email and token. And I don't know. What are your feelings on response code here? Just leave it as 200, something else?
Well, this one would have to be 200, right?
Yeah, I think so. I always get a little fuzzy, to be honest, on the different varieties of success. And then for our error case, we want to return some sort of error response code, either maybe a 400 or a 404, and yeah, say something went wrong. And again, just as a reminder, folks, the big thing to remember with like authentication logic is you don't want to tell people if the email address was valid or invalid. You just want to say something went wrong so that someone malicious can't use that information to figure out who or who does not have an account. Yeah, I think. Oh, I see. Nice. Nice. So you're doing that so then we have a little more information that like the token creation process failed.
Right.
Nice. And now we can hook up when you're ready, we can hook up a route, or it looks like you maybe want to put together a request first.
Oh, that's right. I need to make a route for it, don't I? Sorry, maybe skipping some points.
All good. Yeah, we can just call it login. Yep, with the slash, exact same pattern. Yeah, and now let's hit that endpoint. And we just want to make sure to not pass the auth token when testing login.
Okay. Nice. Good.
Nice, I love it. Yeah, you're gonna want to grab. We're gonna have to use that new token value now for any future Thunder client testing.
It's the same one because we utilize get or create.
Oh, of course. Forgive me. Awesome. We've got login. What are you thinking? You want to knock out? Should we just knock out the logout one and call it a day?
I think we also need the info one, right? We could
Yeah,
probably We
info
can
as
probably get
well.
that done.
Yeah, info is a good one. What do you think? Should we pause kind of for questions now or implement the like a bit more authentication and then pause?
I kind of want to get through all of it just because we're running out of time, and I want to make sure we get through the user before we break out.
Yeah, I think that's a good call.
I'm just gonna make a serializer real quick.
Sounds good.
So for the serializer, I'm just doing it so that I can serialize my user whenever I'm doing the request. No, Apollo. Sorry, everyone. My dog tried getting some attention.
Give that boy attention.
All right. Fields, and then I don't want my email. Instead, I want to see the display name. What else do I want to see? I want to see the address, maybe.
Age.
Oh, the age. Is that all the weird things that we gave this model? Age, display name, and address. Yeah, I think those three things should be good. I don't think we need anything else. Okay, so there's my user serializer. So now it exists. And now instead of here, I want to bring it from serializers, import user and the user serializer. Okay. So
Do we not want to import the user model at all anymore?
it is being imported.
It's in this. Oh, I might have just gotten confused about why we can import it from the serializers file.
Oh, since I'm already importing it from models into the serializers file, I could import the user.
Oh, okay, cool, awesome. I actually didn't know you could do that in Python. That's neat. Cool, thank you.
And authentication classes, and then I think this one should be token authentication, and then we need permission classes, right?
Yep, and is authenticated. And then we're gonna write a get method. That's gonna take a request. And then now we can just use the serializer you wrote.
All right, awesome. So user is equal to user serializer with request.user. And then return response. User, oh, no.
Just, yeah. Yeah.
So hopefully that works if it if it goes correctly.
It's good.
So now URLs.
Oh, nice. I like that idea of just having info be the home route. It makes life simple.
That should do the trick. Let me try it out in Thunder Client real quick. So I'm bringing in the authorization header with my token. I'm going to ping users with a get request. Okay, and I get a 401 unauthorized, and that's because I think I have the wrong token. So let me go to login. I have it in my body. So there's my post. I do have the wrong token, so let me grab it real quick. Go into my headers. There's my token and the authorization headers, and I can go grab a get. And there it is.
Nice.
Display name, address, and age.
Nice. Awesome. Let's do, should we do logout?
Yeah, let's do some logout.
All right, so we're gonna want to make a class named logout, and it's gonna be an API view. And it can be pretty straightforward because we can hook into the nice authentication classes and permission classes. So the pattern is going to be really similar to info that we just did, except instead of a get request, we're going to be handling a post request. So the method will be post, and yeah. Oh, nice. That is slick. That's a great idea.
Yeah, that way I just don't have to keep rewriting it over and over again. So comment request.
Yeah. So basically, you just made a class user permissions inheriting from API view, set the permissions that you want. And since it inherits from API view, it is an API view, and we can pass it in whenever we want to make an API view as to inherit from for our other API views.
When it comes to this token, what's the reference by field named? Do you know
Say
that?
that again.
Oh, related name auth token. There it is. Okay. I'm trying to delete the token, so I was wondering how I could access it. So it's auth token dot delete.
Yes. Exactly. And then we want to return a 204.
Just like that, right?
Yeah, that looks good.
Okay. Let me go to the client. Oh, I haven't plugged it in, have I, to the URLs?
Good call. You have not. And we're just going to want to import the logout API view as well. Nice.
Okay. Boom. Post
Yeah,
request.
let's hit it.
We need to go to logout. I think that's correct. There it is. 204 no content. Awesome.
Nice.
Okay.
Oh,
And then
let's try to get info real quick and watch it fail, and then we can log back in. Or we can break rather, because we've tested login pretty well.
okay, so I try to get it gives me an invalid token. So now I can go to login, send a post request. My body's still there. So there's my new token that I just created.
Nice.
Go over to headers, change this, and I think we actually need a put request method. Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but it says that we should be able to update our user in the assignment, right?
Yeah, we absolutely do need that. Good call. I forgot about that.
Okay.
So we're gonna want. Let me check the assignment. Actually, to make sure. Yep, we need to put users. And oh, I see. You're putting it on the info API view.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense, because then we can just have it on the base route.
Then
Let's see, we've got the user serializer, we pass in the data, we check for validity, we save, we return probably a 204 on line 62, though it's not a huge deal. Otherwise, I think that looks good.
Well, 204 would be no content, and I would want to see the updated data, right?
Right. Yeah, good call. Good
Okay.
call.
So then there's my authorization. I'm just gonna change the age. I'm gonna change the age to, I don't know, 33.
Do we need to log back in?
I am already logged in. Yes,
Okay,
I have the new token. And then I just needed to go to users. And there you go. The new age has been accepted to 33. Easy peasy. Okay, awesome. We covered a lot of ground. But it's also time for a break. I'm gonna go ahead and do a quick overview of everything that we just did, and then afterwards we'll kick in for a break. And then during the break, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. So just real quick, let's start off with our views. We created this login function. This login function will go ahead and grab the email and password from the request.data, which I'm passing in through the body of the request inside of the JSON body. I apologize. Let me close everything that I don't need here. Okay. Once I grab all of that information, I'm going to go ahead and attempt to authenticate a user. If a user comes back, so if this comes back as something other than none, then I'm going to create a token or grab the token that already exists for this user. And then I'm going to return to that in a response. Otherwise, if this fails and I'm not able to create a token, I'm going to say that something went wrong when creating a token, or I'm going to grab the exception saying something went wrong and then return the status 400 for both of them. Now, this user permission classes, I don't think we've seen this before. I'm not sure if it's in our curriculum, but essentially this is all OOP, right? We know that we can utilize object-oriented programming and we can utilize inheritance. So all I'm doing is I'm creating a user permissions class where I will have my authenticate classes and permission classes so that I don't have to keep writing them over and over again. And I'm already inheriting from API view. So this way, when I create my info class down here, I can utilize inheritance from user permissions. That will grab both of these fields and also include the API view within this class.
yeah, that's a great example of like using inheritance in a good way, by the way. I love it.
Yeah. That it allows me to send a GET request, which I can just grab the user from the request because it's going to authenticate that user. And I'm going to utilize my user serializer, which I created. This serializer is referencing to the user model, and it will only return these three fields: the display name, address, and age. That's all I'm able to change or view whenever this API endpoint is being pinged. So that's what comes back in my response. For the put method, I do essentially the same thing. I grab the user serializer, I pass in the original user, which is the one sending the request. And then I tell it that, hey, we're having incoming data that we want to update within this user. And that incoming data may not have all of the fields. It may not have all display name, address, and age. It may just have age. It may have age and address. It may have a variety of these fields and not all three of them. So I need to make sure that I specify that it can accept partial data as well. Afterwards, I'm going to ask, is this new data that I just changed valid? If it is, I'm going to save those changes, return that response. If it is not valid, I'm going to return the errors from my serializer and tell them that they sent a bad request. And then finally, we get into logout, which logout is extremely simple. All I'm doing is deleting that authentication token that's linked to said user. And I'm doing that through the related field, right? So if I go to request.user, my user itself, or my model of my user, does not have a field named authentication token. But if I take a look at the token class, in the token class, I can see that this user has a related name named auth token, meaning that I can access this token through auth token. So now, when I go back over to my views and I try to delete that user, I go into the request.user, I grab the token through the related name, and then I delete it to return a response status of 204. And that is authentication. I know we ate it in an hour and it went pretty fast. Currently it's 8:01. Do we just want to shoot for a 10-minute break and then we could answer questions in those 10 minutes, Adam?
That would be my vote.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to keep the recording going for the next 10 minutes just to make sure that any questions are being recorded. But if anyone has any questions, please go ahead and ask. And let's take a 10-minute break. Let's come back at 10:12, please.
Yeah, like a whole like user info thing or class info thing. For some like I feel like it's uh very like it's only 2 lines, but a lot of stuff's going on with like the token authentication and is authenticated, like permission classes and authentication classes. It's just not sticking to me. Can you like re-explain it one more time? I know it's probably redundant.
No, yeah, of course. No, no problem at all. So essentially, so you're asking about this, you're asking pretty much about this entire block of code right here, right?
And I get the inheritance part. I understand that part. It's just like the keywords like token authentication is authenticated and stuff. Like what's the point of the info stuff, really?
Okay, yeah. So info is essentially just so that we can grab or see the data of a specific user, right? We don't want to see, I don't want to see the entire data that a user comes back from. Like, I don't want to see if this user is a super user, if it's not, or at least I don't want my front end to have that capability, because that's going to expose a lot of information of every single one of my users, right? I wouldn't want them to be able to see their username, their password. I wouldn't want them to be able to see when they joined, if they are super users, if they're not, if they're staff, if they're active. There's just a lot of fields that I just wouldn't want to expose every single time this request is being made, right? So with that said, I want to specify what they're able to view for this information. So I have this info class. And think about it when you log into an application, right? When I log into, let's say Facebook, I log into Facebook, I pass in my email, and I put in my password. Well, that API response probably comes back with something that excludes my email and password, right? It comes back with, hey, this is Francisco Avila. This is the display name that we're going to show. This is how many friends he has. This is how many posts, etc. And then probably a different API, a different API endpoint grabs all the posts of my friends related, right? But when it comes to me, myself, the endpoint will only return vital information that it needs to display in the front end, right? It won't return anything like, hey, this is how many times this guy has looked at this post. They're tracking it, but they don't expose that to make sure that it's all being kept within the backend, and then that way you have some sort of data security. Does that make sense?
Kind of like a filter.
Yeah, essentially it's just a filter. If you to use simplistic words, it's just a filter, right?
Yeah.
Then
I was just want to say, like, I have a Reddit account and I have an email address, but I don't want the rest of the world to see my email address. I just want them to see my display name. So our info endpoint can do that.
yeah, and then
Sorry, to jump in there.
no problem at all. Yeah, and then when this request gets triggered, so once it gets to the get request, it's gonna, I'm utilizing the user serializer, because instead of typing something out where I'm like saying, oh, well, I only want you to return, something along the lines of display name is user dot display name, or what would it be? It would be something like request dot user dot display name, and keep typing it out for every field. Instead, I just created a serializer that will just return those 3 fields for me within the data, right? So then that way, whenever my view is being triggered, all it has to do is I pass it in the user that I wanted to serialize, and then it just returned that data. That way, everything's in JSON. Does that make sense, Cody?
Yeah, and before like, does anybody else have any questions about anything? I don't want to like hog the whole 10 minutes. If not, I do have another question.
I have one, but go ahead.
I mean, I'm just gonna look around the docs, but if you could give me like a quick rundown on really the token authentication. Like, why do you need permissions for info if you're already filtering info to non-sensitive information?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So now, let's say, how do you know whose data it is that you're returning if you don't have that? If you don't have token authentication?
Can you say that one more time?
How do you know whose data it is or what user you're contacting, right? If you don't have token authentication?
Yeah, like
Like, how do I know who you say you are unless you have a token?
Right. Right. Like whose info am I returning to you if you're not sending me a token? Right.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So we can
Sorry.
probably get rid of the permission classes if we really wanted to, right? We're not specifying any crazy permissions. So it's just the permission class is just saying, hey, this should only work if we have users that are being actually authenticated and found within our database, right? And then the token authentication. So what's happening here when I say request.user, before he even gets here, so let me break it down. The API request gets sent, right? And we have this authorization header. Once API request gets sent, the first thing that gets triggered is the class itself, right? So the class gets triggered, and these two parameters get triggered next, right? So the class gets triggered. It says, okay, well, can we accept a GET request? Yes, we can. But then it says, well, these are the two parameters that we need to run first, right? So then it goes into authentication classes. And in authentication classes, well, we have this token authentication. So if we take a look at token authentication, we see that it has a couple of models, right? It has a get model and it has an authenticate. So now the first thing that it does is it goes into the authorization header, it splits it, it finds out if it can find the keyword that it needs, which is just token, right? It finds out if the length is equal to 1 or if it's greater than 2 once it's split. So this is making sure that you have token, space, and then the token itself, right? And then it goes, if it's greater than that, so if you have anything more than just the token and the actual token being hidden within the request header, it's going to throw another error saying, hey, this isn't correct either. Now, if it doesn't trigger any of these statements and tokens being included, it's going to grab that token, it's going to decode it. And once that token is decoded, it's going to return the authenticate credentials. So now authenticate credentials takes in the key. It triggers the get model, which the get model is way up here, right? It's going to try to find the model corresponding to this one key, which is the token instance. Oh, where are we at? Here we go. And then after that, it's going to grab the user. And this is how it sets the user into the request.user header. So if I didn't have this, when I try to access request.user, it would return anonymous user. But because I have this token authentication, it's setting the correct user instance on the request.user. And that's why once it enters my get method, I'm able to do something like this where I'm able to reference to the user himself. That's because my program already found that user by utilizing this token authentication class. Was that more in reference to what you were asking, Cody?
Yeah, I think it's like really showing like where my gap in knowledge is, and and I'm talking with some of the people here in chat as well about like I need to be able to get into these docs like with these definitions to like crack more of the Django code in my brain. But
Yeah.
this was the good stuff for me. It revealed a gap that I need to work on.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it helps a lot to take a look inside of these classes and just read through the code and see what's going on. The problem is that sometimes when you click on it, it's like a really extensive class and it's just nested within a bunch of other things. But these ones seem pretty.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that the token and this authentication one, these are pretty readable and understandable. Francisco, I don't know if you like need to like stand up for a minute or anything, but I can totally spot you if because I know we just ran through like the whole break.
Oh, I'm good to go. I got my coffee, I got my water, that's all I need.
I love it. I love it. I hate this term. I just took a bio break and I'm back. Also good to go. I have no hate for people using the term. I'm not used to it yet. I heard someone use it once and it was like, anyway, so much jargon. Yeah, it's awesome digging into those Django classes and digging into authentication. Good question, Robert, about does it matter if you need a post instead of a put in the info class? We have two methods there in that info class. The get method is for handling getting the information. The put is for updating information. If we're updating stuff, we want to use a put because that's like the pattern and convention of a REST API. And in fact, I don't think anything would break, but you don't want to do that because that's not how a REST API should be designed. And I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, Francisco, before we kind of review and dive into our next steps here.
No, I definitely agree. It will work if you utilize posts, but it's just not the right convention. I quickly see the serializer one more time, of course. All right, and then while we're taking a look at the serializer, everyone could come back now. It is 10:13.
Yeah, and I think up next, so we knocked out, this is great because we knocked out the hardest part. So Francisco, I think it was a great idea to start off with users and authentication, and we've got all that working. And up next, we're gonna want to make some lists and be able to create some tasks for those lists and eventually get to subtasks.
All right, awesome. Let's take a look. Let's start there then. Let's move on to some list. Where's my README? There you are.
I dig it. Yeah, I can read out to you from the README too. I have it pulled up.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, but actually, yeah, the diagram isn't a bad call. So we're gonna make a list. It's gonna have a list name, a user, and if everything on the list is completed or not. The list can have 1 or 0 or more tasks. Tasks can only belong to one list. Yeah, so we're gonna want a list name. User is gonna have to be a foreign key relationship, and completed is a Boolean. And I think we can do like user equals, I want to say models dot foreign key. And then, yeah, we can pass it the user. And I believe that makes sense because if the user gets deleted, we want to cascade and delete all the lists. Yeah, and honestly, I think that looks great. We could test it in the console. We could, maybe we should, what do you think? You want to make some more models or like make some endpoints to create lists? What are you thinking, Francisco?
I think we should tackle the list real quick.
Let's do it.
All right, move on to creating the serializer for it.
Oh, yeah, that's a good call. And we might just be able to do all for fields. Or what are you thinking?
We want to exclude the user because it's gonna, since it's sensitive information, it's gonna freak out if we don't exclude him. Yeah, but I think that should be good.
Cool. And I actually haven't used exclude much, just to make sure I understand that behavior. Basically, instead of a whitelist where fields is the fields we want to include, this is a blacklist where we're going to include everything except user. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yes.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, later on, we'll want to probably add a get tasks, serializer field to that, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So now, let's see, what do we need? We need the whole enchilada, right? Or actually, no, we don't. We just need from user app dot permissions. Oh no, dot views. Import. There it is, the user permissions.
Oh yeah, that is a really useful helper class.
Import, we're gonna need the user because we need, oh no, we don't.
Yeah, we can import just the list model or the list serializer, excuse me. We're gonna need from all the stuff from Django REST framework. I don't know if you just want to copy it over, but we're gonna want a 201 created. We're gonna want maybe either a 400 or a 404. Let's see what else we need for list in terms of response codes. Let me look at the assignment.
Of course.
So, I think we just need a 200 created and a 400 response. We probably need a 204 no content for updating the list. Am I correct in thinking we want to be able to do the full CRUD on lists and tasks and subtasks?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Let's see, we got that. We don't need any of the authentication stuff because you bundled it all up in user permissions. I think we're good to go. And I think we just want that to, yeah, exactly, be a class. And this is going to take a get. So we're going to want to write a get method. And this is going to return all the lists for the user. And so request.user.lists. Nice. Nice. And just as a response, I think we can just return. Yeah, you wanna, should we make a create list endpoint and then we can test both of these out? Okay. All right. Do you want to do this under all lists or under like an A list API view class?
I think this one would fall under all lists because it would ping the same endpoint.
Yeah, you're right. That the route's just gonna be API v1. Let me double check. Actually, okay, it's not slash user. Yeah, just API slash lists. Yeah, you're totally right. All right, let's do it. So let's grab the user from the request. That's probably a good starting point.
So request.data.
I think we can just do request.user.
Yeah, I'm trying to grab the data real quick.
Oh, got it.
And
Got
then,
it. Got it. Good call.
that way I can create it like this.
I see. Nice. Yeah, and you're just gonna pass in the whole request.data.
Right.
Nice. I like it. Yeah. So is it and you're using list objects create instead of like the constructor because objects.create automatically saves as well? Is that correct or?
I believe it does automatically save, but I just do the save just in case.
Yeah,
But I'm sure
I feel
that-
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just used to, I'll just do like list open parentheses and put the stuff in. That's all. I was just curious. I don't like have strong feelings or one way or the other.
Right. Okay. And then do you want me to just put this within a try and accept block?
Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah, and we can just return a generic. We're supposed to return let's see. I don't think the assignment,
Well, I'm assuming this would be a
Specific.
GAP request, right?
yeah, yeah, 400 bad request.
Okay.
Nice. So let's see, we've got data, we edit, we grab the user, we stick that on our data object, we pass all the data with all the fields we want to create our list into list objects create, we save the list. Do we need to do like a full clean validation before save?
We could.
Yeah, it might not be needed. It couldn't hurt. You could also use the list serializer to create the list. Actually,
These, these will throw their errors, and we can't use the serializer because we're excluding the user.
oh, I see. Got it. That makes sense. That is a good call. Thank you. Right. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Okay. Yeah. How are you feeling? Do you want to hook this up to a route and test it?
Oh, let's do it.
All right.
Oh, that's not what I meant to do. I'm assuming this one will be empty.
Yep. And we're going to want to import from our views. Yep. And we can give it a name. And then we just want to hook this up in the project level URLs PY if we haven't. Nice. Yeah, that was cool to see the exclude list. It's a good example too. Like I'm less familiar with that and less used to that pattern. And then there's all these other tweaks that happen because of that, right? We had to create the list a little differently.
Right.
So it's like, yes, everyone sort of, it's good to develop like your own style and stick to it because there's always little twists and turns.
Oh, we haven't made migrations.
Oh, that would do it. That would help, wouldn't it? Nice.
Okay, so there's our migrations. Everything should be good. Let's try it out with some Thunder client now.
Yeah, it sounds good.
And then I'm just gonna send a GET request to make sure that my user's still good. Okay, my user is good. I'm gonna send a GET request to list, which should return an empty list. Okay,
Nice.
perfect. And then to create a user, it looks like I need a list name.
Yep.
And that list name, I don't know, learn to.
And that's all we need really, because completed has a default value unless you want to pass it into test for some reason.
There it is. Nice.
Nice.
So there's
Awesome.
our list.
I love it.
Easy peasy.
All
Okay.
right. What's step one on learn to code? Oh yeah, we should review, and I see Matt has a question. Where do validators fall into all of this? Are they typically developed when the front end is implemented? You want front end and back end validation. Front end validation is really for user experience. But remember that someone malicious could always write a Python script to hit all of your API endpoints. So you can never, ever, ever trust any input coming into your API. So you always need backend validation, which is usually validators on the model as we've seen, or sometimes we can use the serializer for that as well. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Francisco.
Yeah, so validators, specifically when it comes to backend, it kind of depends on when you see them being necessary, right? So for example, if I take a look at my user app, in my model, I had this address field, right? But it's just a text field. So technically the user can type in absolutely anything and it will still be accepted as a valid address. That's not necessarily something that I want. So I could make a validator that will make sure that whatever is being passed into this address field is in some sort of address format. And that's where kind of validators would come into play, which is be to make sure that a field is receiving clean data or the specific format that I want it to come in. Does that answer your question, Matthew?
Yeah, it does. So is it pretty much just like if you have a field that you're accepting user input at some point, like you're just assume my model at some point is going to use user input to populate this field. That's when you want a validator pretty much.
Right. You want to make sure that the user's input is actually coming in clean.
Got it. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah. And in terms of like workflow, like the way we are ignoring validators now to get like a minimum viable product out the door and have a faster workflow, I think is a good approach. And then it's going to be way easier to add them in later once all the big features are done.
All right. So now we're able to get all of the lists. We're able to get create lists. So let me see, learn to, I don't know, draw. Let's make 2 lists. Okay, so now we have 2 lists. If I run a get request, I should see a list with 2 items inside of it. We can see that here they are. Okay, so there's my 2 items within it. Now I probably want to create my put, post, or my put and delete method for both of these. Right? Or is it put, get, and delete for both for
we are gonna need, we're gonna need get as well to look at an individual list. You're correct. Because I think we're doing all CRUD on everything. So the get should be pretty. We're gonna have the list ID passed in as the route. So we can do something like desired list or list equals like request dot user dot lists dot, I forget if it's find or get the model query method. But essentially we could query by ID. Let me actually look that up. Django model get by ID. And I think we can just use get. And we could pass it in as primary key.
Okay. All right. I'm just going to create a method to get a list real quick because I know for all 3 of these, we're going to need to get a list and it's going to need to return a 404. So I'm just going to say list is equal to get object or 404. I'm going to pass in the list and then say that it needs to match the list ID. And then afterwards, it will return said list.
Where does get object or 404 come from?
That comes from Django shortcuts.
Nice. That's awesome.
Okay, so now when I go to get a list, I can say that my list is equal to self.get a list, and I just need to pass in the list ID. Okay.
Right, of course. And we don't need to worry about request.user. Well, so we authenticate the user. I guess in theory, with this approach right now, could I look at one of your lists?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
I would, to be honest, I feel more than comfortable making a to-do to that effect and coming back to re-implement later in the interests of time. But or we can tackle it now, because I do like this is clean and like straightforward, and because you wrote this get a list method, we only will have to change get a list once since we use it everywhere else. Or we can tackle it now.
Yeah, I guess we could leave it for now, then come back to it. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but I can't come up with an easy answer.
I think. Oh, request.user.lists.get. I think that might query, and then we can do like, request.user.list.get pk equals list ID. I'm not sure if that'll do it, but I think.
No, yeah, that should do it. So list is equal to request.user.
I have to say, I love that. I didn't know about that other method, get object or 404, and that's awesome, that shortcut.
I'm gonna have to bring in the 404 in that case. HTTP 404. There you go. Okay, and then afterwards I can return the response, right? And then just pass in the list serializer.
Yeah. I liked your get a list method, by the way. Like if we wanted, we could keep the get a list method on this class. We could write basically get user list or 404 and stick the logic that we just wrote in there, assuming that it works. And
I see what you're saying.
yeah. We might want.
No, because we can't get the user.
We could do. We would have to pass in the user, yeah. We could just pass in the whole request too, to be honest, whichever you prefer.
Yeah. This is fine. Okay, and then just return.
And then we're returning the 404 in the accept. Nice. I think when you use that get list or 404 shortcut, how do you know which one you get back when you use it?
If it returns a list, it will return the actual object. Otherwise, it's just gonna return a 404 response immediately.
Oh, I see. Right, so our get a list. Could you do me a small favor and rename that method to get a list or 404, just so I don't go nuts? Thank you. Right, so we call this, yeah, I love this, and this is a great object-oriented pattern. This does the work of sending the error response, and then like you're saying, if we get the list back, then we know it's good. Okay, so on line 42, we want like list equals self.getAlist and all that other stuff.
Oh, thank you.
For sure. No, this is good. This was a nice like meeting of the minds, and fingers crossed this code will actually work.
Right. Actually, yeah, let's try. Let me see if I could try it out before we even start going into the put methods and all that. Let's see, path, and then this is list ID.
Yeah, it's an integer, and then we just do a list as view, and we'll just want to import the a list class. And give it the name list or whatever we want. But also, if we get this working, we can just use this pattern for tasks and subtasks, which will be great.
Okay, so I know this is working. So we have 1 and 2. Try 2. Nice. It worked. And if I try something like 20. Oh, hello. Response object has no attribute, list name.
The serializer. I wonder if the get didn't throw an error.
It seems like it doesn't. Oh, because this returns none.
We could just do, instead of try except, we could just add a little if list is none, return response. If list is, yeah, I think if list is none.
There it is. Does not exist.
Nice. It's awesome.
Wait, but I don't think that's right.
Oh, that's not right either.
List matching query does not exist. Okay, so now it's failing the correct way that we had it.
Um,
Oh, I see. It's because it's returning this to this.
oh. Mm, right.
Well, you know what? Maybe we could.
So a hack that I'll do is we could return a tuple and have the second tuple be true or false. And if it's false, we know we got back a 404, and we have to add extra logic every time we do this, which is a bit of a pain.
I think this might be, the juice may not be worth the squeeze anymore. What's going
Yeah.
on?
Wait, so can you just return the list equal to the object does not exist and pass that into the response as a list? Yeah, so on line 39, you don't have to return a response. You can just return the list equal to the object.
Oh, well, I see what you're saying. Like, we'd have to also wrap the list serializer on line 36 in a response. At which point we
Yeah.
basically, I don't know how reusable this becomes for like update and stuff. I vote that's an interesting idea. Yeah, if we can get this working in 30 seconds, otherwise I vote the juice is not worth the squeeze. It's not going to take us that long to copy this stuff, or we could just rip out the 404 part from this get a list bit and just have our get a list method just get a list and manually check for none in each of our get, put, post, delete as needed. If we need to do that, that would be the other way.
Okay, so this is, it's grabbing the exception. I wonder how could I get it to just send this response?
Yeah, I think, yeah. I apologize if I kind of led us down a wrong path here. I think we should just do this for now. And we'll just have to manually handle the response and the serialization. And probably what'll end up happening is by the time we write this for like put or delete as well, we'll probably see a pattern we could refactor and use, but we probably can't get there now, so we can also get to tasks. Yeah, and I apologize if I kind of took us down the wrong path here.
No, it's worth exploring, I think. Okay, let's see if that one works. So 2 should work. The moment we return to 20, there it is. 404 does not
Nice.
exist. Okay.
Awesome. Let's do a put. So yeah, let's just copy and paste that in, and we'll worry about dealing with that later. And now we're going to want to change line 50. We're going to want to, yeah. And the put, right, the put will have the list ID and the list body as well. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, nice. Partials true. We might want to put the serialized list inside the if statement just in case the ID doesn't exist. Yeah. I don't think that'll hurt anything. And now our happy path can be here inside list. And I think we can just, oh yeah, thank you. We need to do is valid. We need to do save. And then I think we can return our success response. And if we want to be lazy for the error case, we can do that there as well. It depends how rich we want to make our error messages. That is probably a good idea to give ourselves good data. And yeah, that's awesome actually, because now we've got a bad request and a 404 not found error response. Nice. Let's hook this. Oh, we don't need to hook it up at all. Let's try it. Yeah.
To learn to, I don't know. Sure, clean. There you go.
Hey, it seemed to work.
Okay, and then the last one, which will get us a list. If there is a list, it will delete the list. Nice. So now if I run it to 2, returns 404 no content. And if I send a get request to 2, it should return the object does not exist. And if I send a get request to all the lists, it should just return one object within the list. Okay.
Nice.
All done there.
Awesome. All right, we got lists.
Yes. Let me do an overview of everything because I know that wasn't all right. So we went over all list. That's able to return all list. I'm pretty sure this one's pretty straightforward. Whenever this request is sent, we're utilizing the user permissions, which grabs the token authentication and is authenticated to make sure it sets the correct user. From there, we're accessing all of the list through the related field name of list and grabbing all, and then passing the many equals true to the serializer. That way we can return it through the data. When we go to create one, we're passing the post request. I'm creating a copy of request.data where I'm adding a user field to that data, setting it to the request user. I am then creating a new list object, saving it, and then I'm utilizing the serializer to return a serialized response with a 201 created. I put this within a try and except block so that if it fails, I can get a something gets wrong with an HTTP 400. When it comes to getting a list, so I get into a GET request that will pass into the self.get a list, which will either return 1 or none, which this seems a little bit repetitive now that I think about it, because this is going to return none regardless. But at least we're able to see the try. Actually, it won't return none, and it will throw an error. So that's good that we put it within a try and except block. So now it's going to either return a list instance or it's going to return none within our except block. So here we see it being triggered. If the list is not none, it's going to serialize it and return the data. If it is none, it will return a 404 not found, telling us that the object does not exist. Same thing with the put method. We see it happening here. And here's what would happen if it is none. Afterwards, we serialize it, pass in the data that we want to update through request.data, and then we specify that this is partial. It won't have all of the fields. It may have all of the fields, but we want it to be partial is equal to true. I'm going to ask if this is a valid update. If it is, we will save it and return the data. If it is not a valid update, we will return the errors and tell them that they send a bad request. And then finally, we go into the delete method, in which it will either return an instance of a list or none. If it comes back as none, we'll specify a 404 error. And if it comes back as an actual list instance, we'll delete set list and return a response status of 204, saying that we deleted the list successfully. All right. Does anyone have any questions over what we just covered here?
Could you explain again just how it's connecting the list to the user?
On line 35, we're using the power of Django models, which is, I don't mean to be flip, just to get the ball rolling. I don't know if you want to dig into that more, Francisco, but essentially we're leveraging those model relationships. Where we create the user, and when we created that lists model, we created the foreign key field on the model. And so then Django models lets us do this chaining, and we have the related name lists. And that's what lets us go user.lists. And then that .get is a Django model query method that queries the database by ID. So it's kind of like the permissions, make sure we've got the right user and let us get the user easily. And then once we have the user, the model foreign key relationships and related names let us go to the user's lists, and then we can query to get a specific list by ID.
Yeah, I think so. Still a little bit confused, but I think it's just, learning.
I feel like that didn't answer your question.
No, I think it does. I think it's just there's so much happening like under the hood and like with all the different like things that Django does that I think it's just kind of hard to conceptualize, but I think it does. I think that does answer my question.
Okay, awesome. Clarice?
I guess kind of with that, what if the relationship was on a different part of the model, like if it was under user instead, is it still going to know that relationship if you're calling it from the list model?
As long as you have a related name field between the two relationships, you can access it from the other field, from the other model, right? So here we can see that in this model, I gave it a related name list. If I were to take this off, then the user wouldn't know that it has list attached to it. I would have to access it completely different, right? But because I gave it a related name, essentially what's happening is it goes over to models and it adds a imaginary field where it would say list, and that would be equal to many lists coming from foreign key relationship from list model. Does that make sense, Clarice?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Great question.
Matthew.
Oh, sorry, it lagged. I only heard like the T, so I didn't know who you called. But yeah, I had a question about in your models.py on line 9. You just showed it, but that on delete, can you just explain like I guess what is that doing?
Yeah, so this is just essentially saying this is the way I want you to react if this user is deleted. So if this user is deleted, I want it to cascade. So waterfall, right? Meaning that if I have any list that's attached to this one user, if this user is deleted, all of these lists need to be deleted as well. Does that make sense, Matt?
Yep, got it. Thank you.
Of course. Anna?
Okay, sorry. I guess I do have another question, but on the if you could go back to the views real quick.
Yeah.
We made that an API view instead of inheriting from user permissions, then it would not work, correct?
Right, because we would need to have the is authenticated and the authentication classes in there. Sean?
Yeah, I don't know if you could pull up Thunder Client and like split the screen and then go through each one of these, like get an example of each one and then just kind of talk through the flow, or if that'll eat up too much time. But I think that'll kind of help like conceptualize things.
An example of each one. Okay, so like pinging each one of these endpoints with their individual posts or get or their individual methods. Okay, yeah, definitely. So the first one that we have here is going to be our get, right? So we're going to go to API/list. That will trigger this all list and hit our get method. Our get method will then grab the users. It would grab the list field and grab all of the instances of a list that belong to this one user. And then it will serialize them because we're using the many equals true and return it as the data. So here I can say, send the request. We can see we have an array because we're passing the many equals true. So it knows that it's supposed to be an array of objects. And here's my serialized object for each individual list. Now, if I wanted to create a list, I would open up a object, pass in, I think it's list name. And then I would just pass in, I don't know,
learn to knit or coding.
Oh, there you go.
Perfect.
So then I would send this post request. This post request will make a copy of the data, which in this case is just this one object. It will add a user key to this object, and it will set it to the user sending the request. And actually, let's print that real quick so that we can see it. And once that is sent, it will then create a new list. It will save it, serialize it, and then return that serialized data. Or it will throw an exception telling me I did something wrong. So here I'm going to send my post request. So here's my print statement from the data. We can see that the print statement from data comes in as list name, coding in OOP. That's what I sent, right? And we can see that the user header is being added. So here's the user header, and it's being set to the user instance of fr.fr.com because that's my username, right? So now we can see how that's happening. It is then being destructed and set to create a list. It creates the list, and we get our serialized data back with an ID. Okay.
Yeah. And it's awesome that you used exclude on the serializer, and that's why we don't see the user show up in the data we send back.
Nice. Now, if I just wanted to view one, let's say I pass in the one I just created, I can see that I have the ID of 3. I'm going to send a get request. Well, now this request gets sent. It hits my get. I want to grab a list. So I'm passing in a user and a list ID to this method that I created. So the user gets set through my token authentication. Afterwards, I go inside of my user. I go within all the lists that belong to my user, and I grab the one list instance that matches this list ID of 3. And then I return that list. So the value of list gets returned to this variable right here on line 43. The next thing I do is I ask, hey, is this list, does this exist or is it none? So if it's none, it's going to return object does not exist. So right now, if I send something like 30 or 390, I get this object does not exist with an HTTP 404. But because the object does exist, I'm going to serialize it and return the serialized data. And that's how I get this one object with the serialized data. Now, if I want to update this, so let's say that right now I can see that completed is false. Let's say that I wanted to make it completed is true. Right? So I'm going to send the request. We know how this works already. It's going to either return a list or return none. If there is a list, it's going to serialize that one list. It's going to grab the request data that I'm passing into it and try to update that list instance. I'm passing in partial because I'm not passing in every single field. I'm only passing in portions of that model serializer. It's going to ask, is this valid? If it is, it's going to save it and return the serialized data. If it's not, it's going to return errors telling me, hey, this doesn't work because you're passing in wrong information. So it's going to tell me it's a bad request. So let's see it in action. So now I pass in completed equals true. I sent it, and for some reason it's giving me false. Oh, because I need to change it to put. There you go. So now I change it to put. It's able to pass in the ID. It's updating the completed field from false to true. And here we see it come back because it's able to save it. Now, what if I were to pass in completed is 5, right? Well, when I send this, we can see that I get a bad request. So that's my bad request. And what I'm seeing here is my errors. And that's coming from serializer.errors. So it's saying that the completed field has an error and it must be a valid Boolean. And I pass 5. So now if I turn it back into false and I send this request, we can see that it comes back as false. And then finally, the delete method. We could demonstrate it where we could, it's essentially going to grab that one instance. It's either going to grab that one instance or return none. So let's turn this back into delete. If I turn 30, or if I send 30, it's going to return this object does not exist because it returns none. So this if statement fails and it automatically triggers this response. All right. Now, if I turn it back to 3.0, the if statement will actually work because it has a list. It will delete that list and then trigger a 204 no content. But now I know that it was deleted because if I send a get request back to that ID of 3, it's going to tell me the object does not exist. And if I try to view all of my list, there's only one instance within my array of list. Did that address your, was that kind of what you wanted to see, Sean?
Yeah, that was great. I think just having like the code pulled up with Thunder Client and like step by step walking through examples was really good.
Awesome.
Nice.
All right. Any other questions, anyone?
I'm wondering, should we see how far we can get with tasks in like 20 minutes and then break since we have retro in a half hour? Or what do you think, Francisco?
I agree. Yeah, let's try to get through that one a little bit.
Yeah.
So that we can
Yeah. I figured out how to do the get list or 404. I don't know if it's worth
No, I think
factor. Yeah, I'll show you later. Or if it comes up with tasks. But yeah, let's do it. Let's build some tasks.
All right.
And let's see, let me pull up from the assignment what we need on tasks. So we need a task underscore name. Um. Oh yeah, we're gonna want the list as well. It's a good call. And we're gonna want it to be a char field of whatever length you want.
All right.
We're gonna need completed, which is gonna be a Boolean field. And we should have that default to false. Yeah, nice. We want parent underscore list, and that's gonna be the models dot foreign key relationship to list. And we're gonna want to add the related name of tasks probably. Yeah, and we want to, if we delete the list, we want the tasks to be deleted, so we want cascade. And I think that's right, list.tasks. Does that sound right for related name?
Yes.
Awesome. And then we want task description, task underscore description, which is going to be a char field or a text field. I forget if Django has one, but more text. And those are all our fields for tasks.
All right. Easy.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, and now we're gonna want a serializer for tasks. We'll want to circle back to add the serializer method on the list serializer, but we can get to that later. I'm a little less familiar with serializers, but we can figure out what we want here. And we don't need to connect a task directly to a user. Pause. So here, I'll let you kind of get set up. So you know the serializer stuff well too. I think the main question is, yeah, do we need to exclude like the list ID from it when we send it back? Or
parent list.
Yeah. The other thought I had was like we could do a serializer method for like list ID, but I don't think it's the juice is worth the squeeze right now.
Right.
Yeah, this is way easier.
Okay.
So that looks good. We can, if we wanted to, we could copy a lot of our logic, but basically now we're going to write the views for all tasks. Let's see here. So, and just to give you a refresher on the routing, it's like API / lists / list ID / tasks.
Okay. So API / list / list ID / task.
Yeah, so for all these requests, we're going to have to request user.lists.get the list by ID tasks and so on. Yeah, that looks good. And then we're going to want to have a path for an individual task.
All right. Let's go to the task app.
Oh, that's a good call that we're actually going to use our list view in the task routes. Oh, I apologize. I got confused about which we were looking at. Yeah, so for tasks, we've got the base route. That's going to be all tasks on the list. Which is really going to be the same as that other route, I think, but we can fix that later, and then we're gonna have an individual task. And that's it right now, because we're not doing anything with subtasks, and that would be its own Django app anyway.
Okay, so that should take care of that. Here we go.
Can I see the list URLs PY for just 1 sec?
Of course.
I might have just gotten confused about something. Yeah, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you if you're like laying out the skeleton code and stuff.
Okay, which one do you want to see? The list URLs PY?
Yes, thank you. Okay, yeah, this is what I wanted to ask. On line 7, we have the list ID / tasks. And that's going to give us, oh, I see, I apologize. Okay, you added the include there, right? So then that points to our tasks routing. Got it. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, so now if I want to see all tasks, EF get, that should handle self, comma, request, comma,
list ID.
There you go, list ID, thank you.
For sure.
And then that should then
all underscore tasks, I would say, or however you want to do it. It's going to be request.user.lists.get, and then we can pass in the ID, and then whatever our tasks related name was. I think it was tasks. Oh, perfect. Yeah. And then I think you're right that we'll want to serialize that. Yeah, and we can worry about error handling later. Basically, we would just check if all tasks is there or not, and if it's not, we'll throw an error.
all right, and
then we're going to want to create a task, and it's going to be the same pattern, and create a task however you want. We probably want to follow the pattern that you've been doing that I like, of like, let's make a data object that's a copy of request.data.
Okay.
And then we probably want to like add, I don't know if we can add the list ID on there or not. I don't know if we can like bundle up the data object the same way to create the task. I'd actually have to look at the task model to be sure. Yeah, it's a good idea. Let's just keep it simple.
Oh. Is it parent list? That was the field for the.
So yes. Yeah, let's do that and then just double check it.
It is parent list. Okay.
Nice.
And then
I think that's it. And let's just do a save. We should do a full clean, but in the interest of time, we won't worry about it, and then we can return the task.
okay, so that should get us all of that. Let me bring up Thunder Client real quick.
Irony is how succinct and readable that code is relative to the other code.
Yeah, speed became priority. Okay,
Yeah,
so
it's actually very readable. Yeah, let's do it. Let's make tasks.
All right, so now if I send a request, connection was refused to server no module named task app URLs. What are you
Oh, we have to add it to settings.py, probably.
No, it's there. It's just it needs to be restarted.
Oh, that'll do it. Yeah.
Okay, so now I send it. Okay, so it gives me my one list. Okay, now what if I want to see the tasks? Interesting. Task app has task parent list ID from task programming error.
Is there a line that it's coming from?
It's my serializer.
Is it the list serializer?
Oh no, I am telling it the parent list. What's going on here? Let's see. Did I spell this incorrectly?
Parent list.
Migrations?
Did
Oh,
you
I should
migrations?
probably.
Oh, yeah. There we go. Thank you so much. That would help.
I was testing the class. Yeah, you guys passed.
That was the assessment. Sorry, that was a little bit of an unfair joke.
I'm gonna hold you to that, Adam.
Yeah.
You can hold it to me all you want. I don't think it'll stick. Sorry, I don't mean to be flip. I'm just excited that we're knocking out tasks in record time.
Put in Python, test, description, code. Until we can't. There you go.
And just add a comma at the end of line 3. Yeah.
Okay, so there's my post method. I send it, it's able to work. I send a get. There it is.
There we go. That's awesome.
Okay, and then I remember you mentioning that we want to add this to the serializer for a individual list, right?
If we want it, I mean, we have this other route now to view all the tasks on a list. I have seen that's the pattern we've done elsewhere in the class, where when we get a list, we want to get back all its tasks.
Okay.
It's probably not, yeah.
For the fields we want, well, what are the fields of a list? Is it list name, completed?
Do we want to be adding these to the exclude though? Or do we?
Well, oh no, changes to fields. But what are the field names?
Oh, list name, completed, and that's it. It's the user and list name and completed. So yeah, we can just do tasks. And now we'll do I think it's called a serializer field from REST framework. I want to say .serializers. Let me double check.
That would be for many to many.
I'm sorry.
In this case, we could just grab the one from the task app. .serializers import task serializer. And I think that should do the trick. Task name. Okay, error when attempt to get a value for field task name on serializer, task serializer. There it is.
Oh, good call. Good call. We don't want to instantiate the class. We're passing the class definition, like the class name around.
Well, no, I think that's wrong, actually.
Well, that gives us the task ID.
Yeah, it should give us the serialized data. All right. Yeah, so for some reason this is giving me an error, but it shouldn't. Attempting to get value for field task name. We do have a fields task name, don't we? Well, see, because if I send it towards task, it works. I wonder.
Let's see. I'm gonna use my friend to Google and see what it says.
That's not it. Oh, there you go.
What's the change we need to make?
Many needs to be true.
Oh my God. All right. Well, whenever it's an easy fix, that's always nice.
I don't want to seem big. Yep, there it is.
Nice. Nice. Okay.
Okay. Easy peasy. Well, there
Yeah.
goes.
We
There
actually, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Francisco.
Yeah, and we finished that in perfect time. I was about to say,
Same page.
I'm gonna do a quick overview and then answer any questions. But please know that we are kicking retro here in about 9 minutes. So if you want to take a break before retro, please take the next 9 minutes to take a break. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer questions. And then Matt, I saw you raise your hand, but let me do a quick overview real quick before we get into your question. So for this get request that we created is going to grab the list the same way that we had it before. It's going to grab it by the list ID. Once we have that list coming from the list that belong to this one user, we're going to grab all of the tasks and serialize them and return them in our serialized data. For a post request, we're doing essentially the same thing. We're grabbing the one list, we're taking a copy of the data, and then we're creating the parent list field within the data and assigning it to the list that belongs to this one user. We are then creating a task. If that is successful, we save it. And after that, we return it in a serialized manner. Now, the one change that we made was to our list serializer. So our list serializer, we want to make sure that all of the tasks are also included in there. So we included the field of tasks. So that's going to go to the model. And once it takes a look at the model, it's going to say, wait a minute, I don't have any tasks. What are you talking about? Well, remember that tasks is coming in as a related name from the task class. All right. So now it's going to say, okay, well, I know that there's a task happening from a related name, but how do you want me to serialize all of this information? So up here, I'm passing it the value of tasks, and I'm going to tell it that I wanted to serialize it as if there were many, because it is many. It's not a one-to-one field. It is a foreign key. So it knows that there is many being related to this one list. So I'm going to pass it with many equals true. And that's how we were able to serialize that information. Does anyone have any questions over that? Go ahead, Anna.
How's that different than using like the serializer method field?
So when you utilize the serializer method field, you essentially have to write out a method that would explicitly tell the serializer how to set it up or what exactly it is that you want to see. Right? When you utilize a many-to-many relationship, you need to do a serializer method field because it can't just relate to, it's something about the instances, right? So essentially when you utilize a many-to-many, what's happening under the hood is it has both of the models, but then it creates a third table that actually connects both of those models, right? So when you utilize a many-to-many, you have to create a method field because you have to be able to access that one data table in between them that's connecting them. And that's why you have to do an object method, or you could just do it for formatting purposes, right? Whereas in this case, what I'm doing is instead of writing an explicit way. I already have an explicit way that I wanted tasks to show up. I did it here, right? So instead of rewriting this through a method serializer or anything like that, I'm just calling it within my list app, telling it, hey, you're going to utilize that serializer in that other file to serialize this task. Does that make sense, Anna?
Yes, thank you.
Of course. And then Matt, I think you had a question as well.
Yeah, I just get confused, like where the user, like how it knows what user the task list and everything's associated, like at least from the serializer perspective, unless it just doesn't matter here.
From the serializer perspective, it's never referencing to the user.
So it's just the wherever this list serializer is referenced is before then at some point it gets the user like token and does all that.
Yeah, so it's happening within the views. So let me take a look here at the app, right? So here in this user permissions, let me open that up as well. So we're inheriting this user permissions, right? And what it's doing is when it triggers, it grabs the token then gets decoded and it finds a one-to-one relationship with our user model and it returns that user to request.user header. So our request.user is equal to the model that is holding this token that's coming back from token authentication. That then sets it as an authenticated user. So our permission classes, making sure that it's authenticated works as well. So that happens as soon as it gets this class is triggered, right? It checks for the token, make sure there is a token. And if there is one, then it sets token authentication, sets user instance to request.user. All right. So then afterwards, here in all tasks, we're able to go into request.user. That takes us to our user field. And that is down here. All right. So that takes us to our user. But then we want to be able to access these lists. Well, list doesn't exist within user, but it does come from a related name. So it goes into list. And that is happening right up here. All right, so now it goes into list from our views. So our user.list, and then we run this get method to return only one list. So now we return this one list model, all right? And then we ask it to grab all of the tasks pertaining to this one list. Well, again, this task doesn't exist, right? But task is coming in as a related name from our models in here. So that's how it's able to grab all of the task instances from that one user. Does that make sense? It's kind of like daisy chaining.
Yeah, so is the related name essentially just like a column name for that model, but it's not actually creating a column? Like it's just temporary, like makeshift one.
Right. It's just a way for Django to make the connection backwards, but it's not actually happening within the database.
Okay, that makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
So the only stuff
sorry.
actually made is the stuff we're defining in our model. Essentially, like the actual so for instance, you did the user equals in your lists and tasks, you had the user, so that field actually exists like in the database.
What are you talking about?
I believe it's in your models for, I think it's in both task app and the list app in your models.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the user there. So for your list model, like the like database actually has a user field then, like it has a column.
Yes, for the
Okay.
user. Yeah,
Got
so here, if I take a look here, right? So if I do select all, or let's say I do select tasks from user, it's gonna tell me that there is no column named that. But if I say select user from list app. Oh, it's also gonna tell me. Let's see. I think my SQL might be rusty.
What's going on?
Oh, there it is. It saved it as user ID. Yeah, see, so even though I saved it as user, it knows it's a foreign key relationship, so it stores it as user ID.
Okay, yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Of course. Sorry, Adam. I was trying to show that the field of tasks would not exist within the user.
Got it. Nice. Nice. It is 11:30. So we should probably stop recording if we didn't and wrap